Ba-doop-a-doop.
Sugared up, doobadap boom.
Dooba-doop-a-doo.
Hippity zams.
All right, so I'm Hank.
And I'm Alicia.
I was even thinking I'd start calling you PolychromatiCat
Ooh.
on mic. I feel like that counts as your identity as much as anything.
Pretty
does.
much,
So,
yeah.
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 And it sounds cool.
Yeah,
so.
I guess might as well be.
Might as well be cool.
Yeah.
And this is Army of Me 2. Because there's 2 of us.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Legion. Spoilers ahead for Legion. Season 2, Episode 2. That's the one we're going to be talking about. It was Chapter 10. Did you want to... I guess I'm sitting closer to the screen. So I'm going to read I'm going to read the synopsis a little bit here. Or do we want to read the synopsis, or do we just want to fucking plunge ahead and talk about stuff?
I feel like it's important to just kind of give an outline, so that, because
I
we are
agree.
going to be all over the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read the outline. All right. David agrees to work with the Shadow King and causes a distraction by taking many of the others out to the desert while the Shadow King takes Oliver's body to Division 3, where he believes the last surviving monk of the Migo Order may be hiding. The Migo monks had played a role in hiding the Shadow King's body. The Shadow King doesn't find the monk, but he does find several soldiers and traps Carrie Loudermilk within the body of Carrie, the girl who's usually within his body. Members of Division 3 begin to suspect that David is working against them. He regrets helping the Shadow King now that it caused a loss of life. And he convinces the Loudermilks to further enhance his abilities to try to connect Sid in the future, though he lies to them and says he's using it to track the Shadow King. There she explains that David will kill the Shadow King within a week of his time, but then a plague will kill most of the humans on the planet, and the Shadow King could have helped them stop it. Returning to the present, David confronts the Shadow King, who agrees to no longer kill people in exchange for David's continued cooperation. David tells Sid what he's doing, and she agrees that they should do as her future self says.
This is so interesting. That's
So much stuff.
so many things in this episode. Like, visually, again, such a beautiful artistic piece.
Oh, I'm sorry, just super quickly. This episode was written by Noah Hawley and Nathaniel Halpern, who I believe are writing all of this season, and it was directed by Anna Lily Armapour.
Yeah. That's
All right.
exciting.
Credits.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right on.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I was just commenting on it being visually beautiful. I think that the first thing that's striking about is the episode starting on the merry-go-round, which is disorienting. Very disorienting. They even do different camera angles on the different people when they're talking. That is disorienting. And it's a real back and forth between Oliver and Lenny and them working out, basically trying to convince him that this was for the betterment of everyone involved, right? And we kind of left off the last episode with him agreeing to do a lot more without really knowing why. He was just trusting
David agreeing?
Yes,
Yeah.
David. Yes, him just agreeing to go along with this. And there was just so many black spots in this year of his life. What did you do? What happened to you? And then people trusting him. This episode, definitely all of those things have repercussions, right? And that's what I appreciate, is that, like, I didn't expect that we were going to go through the whole of the episode with not knowing if David was still a good guy protagonist or if he was working in cahoots in a secret way that could be detrimental to everyone around him. He's still working for what he thinks is a good thing. He thinks that future Sid is looking out for everybody. By the way, sorry, just on that, did recognize that she was missing an arm. I didn't see that in the first time through, and I was wondering about that, why we couldn't see her arm in the orb before.
Well, see, one of the things they're kind of playing with is we don't know that those are both from the same time period, let alone, and this is way too much to, like, start getting my head around, but, like, if they're from different futures, like, you get, like, is there time travel and dimension travel? I don't want to draw that into it because that draws all of reality too much into question, but I will, like, yeah, her in the orb from episode 1, that I don't think she looked as old.
She didn't.
Whereas, yeah, it looks like he went further into the future.
And she did make a point of saying, in my timeline.
Yeah, that's part of where that stuck out in my head. Yeah,
and it's like, well, when somebody says that, it's like, okay, you've altered the past by your interaction.
I mean, whether or not they follow up on that, the other thing is that's a very X-Men comic thing for someone to say. They said something very X-Men comic in this episode. I don't think you haven't read the right X-Men stuff to be familiar with it. There's a point when Carrie is looking at the orb, he mentions that he first thought it was Shy-R technology.
Yeah.
Do you know
No,
Shy-R?
what is that?
In the X-Men comics, you have the whole Phoenix saga where you have Jean Grey and she's a telepath and telekinetic, and then she winds up being a host to this cosmic entity known as the Phoenix Force, which is kind of reborn through people. And the Phoenix Force is incredibly powerful. It can like snuff out entire suns without very much effort. And shortly after Jean begins manifesting the Phoenix within herself, this alien race shows up, and they're the Shy-R, and they're a super advanced alien race, and part of their deal is they track the Phoenix and they destroy it when they find it, because otherwise it destroys everything else. I think this may have been right after... While she was asleep, the Phoenix took over Jean Grey and she flew to another galaxy and literally destroyed a sun.
Wow.
And there was a full like Earth traveling around it and like everything fucking died. And she just kind of did it. Like, I don't even know if she was conscious of it.
Huh.
So yeah, so that's who the Shy are. The Shy are have a royalty. I don't know how much their royalty is, like how their political system works, but I know that there's like a Shy are, you can be a princess or a queen, just because I know Professor X dated one for a while.
Okay. Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice little drop in there to know that enriches the universe a little bit more, right? Because the more involved with Division 3 that they get, the more that starts to fill out too. So that's really cool. And he said something about how he couldn't shake the feeling that he had made it, that he had made the orb, and like.
Because he did in the future.
In the future, right? Well, and it just again, these are little bits that make me wonder, well, whose future? And I wonder if Carrie and what am I trying to say? You got me stoned before this. Before Carrie and Sid, thank you. Before they are they still together in any way? Are they still interacting and helping each other? Are they like, where have their paths taken them?
I think they are. Okay, let's start breaking down some theories.
Okay.
Sid says that thing. Like, okay, when David is talking to future Sid, she says some stuff about, I never thought I'd see you like this again. I think David is the villain.
Yeah.
And this thing where they're talking about the plague that they have to stop, and the reason why future Sid is happy and surprised to see him is because he's been a villain destroying the Earth for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is their attempt
scary.
to... So, I mean, oh man, there's a terrifying idea where possibly like Sid from the future is telling him to help the Shadow King so the Shadow King can kill David.
Yeah, so that it stops a bigger threat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they've already said that it is to stop a bigger threat. And likely that bigger threat is David. Yeah,
but and that's exactly it. She's very vague about that, right? And he makes the assumption about the sickness.
And again, in re-listening to it, it seems so obvious. But I mean, now I'm looking for it when I'm watching it, so...
Yeah, and I really... Okay, so can we talk about old Blue Eyes, the Frank Sinatra, would you rather be a fish? That scene is amazing. I liked it.
It's a lot of fun.
It is.
This is a very musical show.
The dance scene is great, and I really love how musical it is. It keeps things... I feel weird about it because it's lighthearted, and they're clearly enjoying themselves, and people are just dying, and... into ash, and this is dramatic, and then we get to see where he won't kill children, which is pretty fucking cool to see that there's a line in the sand there, because
I mean, he would have, I'm sure,
if
like he gave them the option. I mean, there's a bit of he couldn't have made the adults run away. So there is like, if he could have made them run away, maybe he would. I don't know. He seems very cruel.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And I think even when we get later on and they're having the interaction, David and Farouk, and he's trying to be convinced to not kill, and he's like, oh, that was more fun though, right? And it's like, well, when people kill, or when you're trying to give an idea for this archetype or motivation for them, there's it goes back to D&D for me because I'm a nerd. It's like this chaotic versus lawful perspective about lines in the sand, and why you would choose to not kill children because they're young and malleable and are not your enemy, and would choose to not kill you if given a choice, one thinks, right? It's the same with like killing animals and stuff. There's a certain line in the sand, even for really hard, chaos-driven murderers. They still have some things, and I know that Farouk comes from a human being and at some point has these things that make him who he is. So it's just interesting to see how that plays out. Mm-hmm. And like, again, that leads me to the other point about Farouk, and I think you were talking about this in your review about his sensuality, and his sensuality crosses over into a level of dominance that is so fascinating to me, because he has this enormous ego. You can tell because Lenny uses it, and to a certain extent, David uses it, and you see his reactions to when people give him respect or when they don't give him respect. He talks about not being a cockroach, right? You can't just squish me. I'm bigger than that. I'm a fucking god, right? So he's got this enormous ego, and you can see people playing up to these different things of him. But that seems like a very base, not godlike perspective, but so does killing for fun, right? So there's like this level of like, who's this person? What are they moral in any way, or is this still just another manipulation?
For me, I like how much this feels like a very realistic handling of the classic X-Men Magneto sort of mutant agenda of, we are better than them. Mm-hmm. We're more than human. And like, what would that mean if you didn't want to organize an army, if you just wanted to walk the earth and make people do as you felt, and like just saw people like we see animals? Mm-hmm. And yeah, I really like how that manifests through the Shadow King and how he sees the world in a sort of detached indifference.
Yeah, well,
mingled with being a sensual hedonist.
Well, and coming from, at one point, living as a mortal person, right? And that's the thing, is that you still have this tethered connection, and that's why I wonder about things like not killing children, because like,
well, getting back to that, I mean, I would like to, some of this is sort of almost more headcanon for me, but like, as much as like we saw him not kill children right there, I feel bad using this term necessarily this way, but like, he molested David since he was a baby. Mm-hmm. And like, there's a degree, this is the part that's headcanon that I was kind of thinking about earlier today, of like, he clearly raped David. Mm-hmm. Like, David might not be aware, but it's one of those like he was inside David through every single one of David's personal experiences, like a sexual experience. He was there when David lost his virginity, like yeah. Everything, and was fucking with him so there's a like, he is willing to murder children. Yeah. And not only that, there's a part of me that wants to give him the full Freddy Krueger treatment of like, no, he literally sexually molested a 3-year-old child and like lived in their head. Yeah. Like didn't just pass through this thing cruelly. He fucking set up shop.
It's and then a wholehearted invasion.
And with the plan to like, I don't know, again, like, what does he get? A tapeworm. The tapeworm. This idea that he is something, that what is a tapeworm? It goes and it lives inside your gut, and it fucking attaches itself to you, and it feasts off you.
It lives off of you, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can't live really on its own. Farouk needs a body, right? Yeah. So he had David for a while, and now he's got Oliver. So.
But they're not his body.
No.
He wants his, and the idea that he has multiples hidden inside of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, because that was, I feel like, the other, we got to meet the Shadow King, and we got to learn that Lenny is separate from him. Lenny is a real thing. And I remember now in season 1, there was a point, I think it's when David and Sid switch bodies, and we see that Sid like has a weird manifestation of David's powers, and you see a whole bunch of people trapped in walls.
Yeah, she kills Lenny.
Sid.
Yeah.
Or yeah, Sid kills Lenny.
Yeah.
And yeah, now it makes sense to me of like, oh, okay, so like, yeah, the Shadow King was using Lenny before then, and then took Lenny into himself.
Yeah.
What do you make of that whole like, why can't Lenny leave the Shadow King?
Well, she is just a consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And a consciousness can't really exist without a body. Now, she does say something like, you can make me one, which
Yeah.
makes me wonder what actually his abilities are.
I mean, I would be even willing to say, like, beyond making, like he could force her mind into somebody else's body and just
That's
take
kind
it
of
over.
where I went with that too. But I was just like, oh, is he going to be strong enough as in his body to create a body for her?
I mean, I could see that as well, just being as he turned a dude into a pig.
Yeah.
Like, he clearly, like that implies he could turn a pig into a, like, raw human that, again, he could process.
Yeah.
I'm really hung up as to whether or not this show shares my nihilistic atheist outlook on the universe, because that feels like where it was going to me.
With the what thens?
Yeah, because like I can see that like there could have been a narrative of like, oh, like if she believes she's a bad person, then maybe she believes she's gonna go to hell afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I like the idea of like that he's threatening her with non-existence. You can stay in this cage, or you can be nothing.
Yep.
What would you rather?
Well, and I've heard that so many times. That's the deal with the devil,
I was
right?
gonna say, what kind of people are you
Like,
dealing with
this
that
is-
people are constantly making
every
that
day they're just like,
live in a cage or
yeah,
be nothing?
take the red pill, take the blue pill. Yeah, no, but
Stop hanging out around men's rights activists.
oh gosh, that's horrible.
Yeah, it is.
Ugh.
All right.
Anyway, yeah, just that I think that that's something that I've seen in other things before, and I'd have a hard time calling a reference to, but it is like this option of, well, you can exist in this form or you can not exist, like you said. And like she does really want to live and have a body and have choice and autonomy. You might want autonomy in life, but you could live a lot longer and relatively comfortably in this space, but you have no control. But it's just another manipulation tactic. It's another deal with the devil. Sell your soul, right? Sell your soul and you'll live forever.
I mean, not that she even necessarily has a choice in it anyway.
No,
which
exactly.
Is like he is just toying with her. But yeah, I don't know. It's a fascinating way to trap somebody. And it also just fucking reeks of abusive relationship techniques as well, of the like, what, are you gonna leave me?
Yeah.
Like what, and die out there on the street? You'd better stay with me, because I just get drunk and slap you around a bit every once in a while. Like,
And it's just going to keep happening in the show because that's how they collect personalities and people inside themselves, right? And there's a better deal there for them.
there's another thing too, where there's a character I think I've mentioned before, Grant Morrison. Before writing New X-Men, he wrote a series called Doom Patrol, and one of the characters in Doom Patrol was a multiple personality person. One of the villains in Doom Patrol was a person who absorbed consciousnesses, and constantly when they were doing things, all of their statements were penetrated by people begging for help within those statements. Like, I'm going to go to the help me, get me out of here store now.
Yeah. Oh, that's and I like that. I hope that there's more of that in the future. I wanted to bring up Oliver too, right? Because Oliver was in this unique state where he had been isolated for so long and had only really come back to the world for that.
Isolated.
Ah.
Oh my God, was that
God.
intentional?
You could throw that in a glass and put some whiskey on it.
I might.
You could. Isolated and back in the world for like a couple of days.
Oh,
even.
barely that.
And
yeah.
he wasn't even remembering his attachments. He had like just near the end remembered Melanie's name and who she was. And now he's part of the Shadow King, and the Shadow King is riding his body, and there seems to be very little resistance in all of his interactions. I am not seeing like a hesitancy or some sort of like with Lenny. You have her playing along, but now you have an example of her being like, no, but I'm still a person and I'd still like to go and I'd still like to have my life. Where is Oliver in that? And is he maybe in that situation because his mind was already so far gone?
I think that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's a degree of like the Shadow King is probably playing a weird game with Oliver as well, but that Oliver might be. I'm trying to remember how aware Oliver. Here's a question. I'm going to sidestep all of this in a weird way. Do you think we're ever going to see the weird, lumpy, yellow, long-armed, long-fingered demon thing again?
Well, oh gosh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, it almost feels like that was sort of the manifestation of what they defeated in the last season, but it was also
Still part of him.
well, and they haven't really brought back any of the like what was it, the angriest boy in the world, and I feel like there was possibly one other like weird little head fuck thing that showed up a couple of times that like yeah, now we're 2 episodes in and
We might not see it again, but it might have also had to do with the interaction of Shadow King with David.
yeah,
right.
that
And
now
them-
that he's out, it changes David's whole
Yeah.
mental landscape.
Yeah, exactly.
And now that gets into the whole thing about how we already hear his British intellectual voice
Yeah.
speaking inside of him more often.
Okay, so that's a question. When he is going to, I think he was going to talk to the Carries.
Yeah.
And you hear his voice doubled up, but I don't think it's the same the second time. It sounds like it's almost 3, like him, a second voice and a third voice, that are all him. And that's super interesting to me because like, is that his logical side coming through, or is there more now here that he's still not sharing with us?
I think we're watching him fragment, and we're gonna meet each one of his personalities as they form. Essentially, that like I feel like almost the Shadow King cracked him, and then the Shadow King was the duct tape around it all, and now that's gone. And as sort of as you were saying, like now his emotional landscape is manifesting. So previously it was things like the world's angriest boy or the weird like yellow-eyed demon thing. And now it's all him. But it's funny because in that scene, like, that's what I thought the show was going to be from the get-go. I thought we were going to start the show. In the comic, that's what it is. He's just a dude with multiple personality disorder, and all the little voices are always saying shit inside his head. So again, I like this idea of like, oh, we're going to get there.
Yeah.
But it's still not going to look like what it looked like in the comic. It's going to be its own unique thing.
Yeah, which is great.
In the comic, all of his hair stands perfectly on end.
Nice.
That's his thing.
I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll get there. He'll be able to power up.
They've hinted at it. They've hinted that they might. Yeah.
I like all of when his shirt has the triangles on it, the different triangles, and they always find a different way to kind of draw that in. And I remember when it was going to the scene where he was meeting up with Farouk in the field, and he's they're pulling up away from him in the shape of a triangle. And I thought that was like really cool that they just kind of do that. It's like, no, this is David at his center, but he is on the astral plane and he is with Farouk communicating. That was just really neat.
It's, I to my mind, it's maybe the best cinematography I've ever seen in a TV show. I know there's like a bunch of shit I haven't seen that might be really great, but like, holy fuck. Like this... So yeah, Noah Hawley did the Fargo TV show before this, and like I remember going into the Fargo TV show thinking of like, you know, like Fargo, Coen Brothers stuff isn't just the story. How the Coen Brothers shoot things, they're weird. They do a lot of like surreal, dreamlike, like if you think of the Big Lebowski, like all the dream sequences and weird shit, and like just
tonally,
really creative camera angles.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Fargo lived up to that. Fargo was like, oh, you didn't just get the story, like you get Coen Brothers. And I fucking see it all over Legion, all over like yeah, I want the fucking the set dressers and the people in costuming should be the people who win awards.
Absolutely.
It's so fucking good.
And it there are parts in it that are so comic booky. They're the scene where David's coming up the step and Clark's there, and it's just like
they shoot, and like the shadows are so fucking
so cool. I love that. And like again, another interaction with Clark, who is awesome
and is kind of the secret protagonist of the story while still managing to be a villain. I really loved his when David threatened him and Clark was like what? What are you going to keep doing to me?
So, okay, I had a thought about that scene. So, I feel like, I don't know how you feel about this, that Clark is reaching out to David. That Clark
Yeah.
is trying to give him an opportunity to still be the good guy that Clark might think he is deep down, even
Yeah.
though they're gesticulating, even though there is this back and forth. I felt like watching that scene that I was watching how David might have acted his whole life to every person who ever asked him a question, where he kind of wormed away from it and kind of gave examples that were not what he was asking. And it's like, no, you need to answer these questions. Oh no, but this thing, just let me do my job. Just let me do my job. I'm not going to answer your questions because I'm better than that. And Clark is just like, look, man, we could be working together. It doesn't have to be like this. But he is also like, David, you're being an asshole. So what did you think of that scene? Did you take from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like David previously, everything we know about him is that he's a piece of shit. Like if any of those memories with him and Lenny are accurate, like he seems like a sort of privileged, like not quite
Selfish.
rich kid, but close to it, and like just one of those people who like by the time he was 25 was just doing drugs all the time and lying to everybody. And like wasn't there a whole thing like him stealing money from his sister? Like I just know him and his sister had a bad relationship.
Yeah.
And like because he was a piece of shit to her, and again lied about doing drugs all the time. So like yeah, I feel like David's a bit of a I don't want to use the term punk wrong here, but there's a bit of a like Clark
Anti-authority.
is an authority figure, and David, but like David's also the worst of it. He's like fucking he's what now some of this is because I was just fucking listening to the King Mod cast, this podcast about the Invisibles, and they were talking about the character Jack Frost, who's one of those like, yeah, I'm a fucking like punk and I don't give a fuck about anything. Like he wouldn't even call himself a punk. He's just like I don't give a fuck about nothing. But there's such a like, yeah, so you're gonna fucking grow up to be a fucking nobody. You're just gonna fucking marry somebody and have a bunch of kids who are little robots just like you, and like what you think is you being an anti-authority figure, you're just fitting the fucking mold perfectly. And like I feel like David's one of those of like David never had a will or a purpose. David wasn't rebelling against anything. He was doing drugs because he was bored and rich, and he knew it.
I feel like he probably also felt the world had scorned him, and that's something that I think people with mental illness suffer from, is that like when you get misunderstood so much and you're not helped a lot, you don't trust anyone, you reject people outright in relationships because you're the only consistent thread in your life because you've lost so much through your mental illness. So like there's a little bit of that as well.
See, and like being a long-term X-Man person again, my instinct is to mistrust humans in positions of authority, like everything Clark is a fucking like those are the fucking baddies. Those are the guys making sentinels and fucking like we're gonna kill fucking kill mutants when they're born and all that shit.
You were the bad guy. That's what he said.
But everything they've shown us about Clark is a like, no, he's 100% right. Like people like David need to be fucking controlled. He's accidentally murdered a lot of people. So like yeah, like and like the thing about Clark is I find he's not even an asshole about it. He's just clever and manipulative.
Yeah. Well, and he's paying attention.
Yeah.
Right? And like he's got his goals and he sees David for what he is, not as a savior, which is when Melanie talks about David is just like, well, don't piss off the only guy who can help us. And there's a certain understanding with that, and it comes up in X-Men stuff too, about how you kind of want to keep these guys on your side because if you don't, they're going to go work for the other side and everyone's going to die. And even though David is sitting somewhere in the middle right now where he's going to end up the villain, but people are hoping that he doesn't, these interactions with Clark, this a line of authority and that being a reason to continue to lie. These are the things that can make him into that kind of monster, right? And we do get to see scenes where he validates the lying, saying that, Sid in the future told me not to talk, but by all reason, a lot of the people around him have shown him trust and compassion and shown him that they can be counted on, and he is not really giving them that right now. And even Clark, to a certain extent, has given him more respect than he probably deserved at this point.
For sure, more than he deserves. But I mean, again, like you say, like he's do you know that fucking Twilight Zone episode where there's a kid who can make anything happen with his mind? So everybody has to, the Simpsons did a version of it too. And like, you can't tell that kid to go fuck himself. Like, he'll fucking turn you into a Jack in the Box. Like, you
or
have
a pig.
So that's where they're at with David.
Yeah. Yeah, just hoping that he doesn't turn into a monster.
And all evidence kind of foreshadows that he will. Foreshadows. Shadow King.
Look at that, you're getting jokes and stuff.
All right,
it's funny too.
Well, that was this episode. I think that was a big look at chapter 10.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Just last point about the last scene with him and Sid.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel like she's gotten over the year of abandonment very quickly.
I feel like Sid is a person who's gone through a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And like just...
She's rolling with it.
She's tough as fuck.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I feel like the plot needs her to depend on David more than she actually does a lot of the time. She's tough as nails, that one.
Yeah, she's not like Melanie, but they make a lot of similarity drawn there, right, about waiting around for him. But like Sid's got her own thing, and that's maybe what we're gonna find out with future Sid and what happens to her and her choices.
And her arm.
Yeah.
All right.
Poor arm.
Pretty scary. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll be back next week with more Legion talk. Thanks for being here. I forgot how to say it. PolychramaticCat.
There we go. PolychramaticCat. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Hank.
I'm going to edit it so you don't hear that part.
All right, perfect.
Or this part.
Yeah, no, cut that out too. And this bit.
And this part.
And this bit.
And this bit. All right. Goodbye.
See ya.
This has been a Death by Media Man production. For more Death by Media Man content, check us out on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. If you dig what we did, feel free to leave us a like or a comment and share this link with your friends. And if you'd like to support us with some of your money, we got a Patreon as well. Thanks so much for listening, and remember... crap, I forgot what I was going to tell you to remember. Well, anyways, thanks for listening. You're awesome.